And we're recording.
Welcome to the Quiet Chaos Podcast. This is your host, Jason Sullivan, and we are back again. This week, we have a special guest. We have with us Sharon Hirsch, who is the author of the upcoming book, Belonging. And she has authored, Sharon, now tell me if I'm right on this, I think 11 other books. Is that right?
Oh, you're a little generous. Seven other books.
7. Okay. I thought
11.
I've been adding all these years. Okay. And we also have Dr. Joanne Hands with us, who is the president of the Middle Eastern Psychological Association and also the clinical director of the Kuwait Counseling Center.
Hello, everybody.
And also with us is our regular roundup.
The gang.
The gang.
Again.
The gang. We have Hussein.
Yes, hello everybody.
Hi,
How are you doing?
and Dina.
And this is Dina Al-Wahib. Hope we're gonna have fun with our lovely guest tonight.
Definitely. Well, Sharon, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write Belonging. I'm really curious because I felt like when I was reading it, I kept going back and seeing so many of the issues that are going on worldwide right now, but also in the U.S. But what really inspired you to come up with this book on belonging?
Well, I wish I could say that I knew we were going to be in this time of disorientation and fragmentation. And so I wrote this book about connection, but the book actually started 4 years ago and was supposed to be a book on narcissism. And as we got into the process, we feel like here in the States anyway, we see an example of narcissism almost every day on our television screens. And so maybe writing about what is the opposite of narcissism, which is belonging. And so that's how the book started. It turns out it is a book for these times. And I'm grateful for that. But that was kind of the beginning of it, is what is anti-narcissism, which is it's all about me.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And it's exciting because it really does fit into a time. I mean, the irony that in the States, just from watching the news, I mean, we're recording from Kuwait. So watching the news, we kind of see the highlight reel. A lot of narcissism coming out of the White House.
You mean low light reel.
The low light. That's pretty much. And so watching from a distance, I mean, I've been in Kuwait for about 10 years now. And so I've been watching from a distance, and we do see the low light reel. And oftentimes I think, I hope it's not as bad as it looks on TV.
It may be worse.
Oh,
Maybe worse. I was afraid you were going to say that. Yes.
So what do you see, though, as one of the challenges that we face? Because going into a pandemic and the fact that you were starting off on narcissism, I mean, there was already a lot of evident need for belonging.
I think about narcissism, the most compassionate way I can think of it is generally there is a deep wound that results in a feeling of entitlement to fill that emptiness that the wound caused. And so we see that in individuals, but now as a world, and then certainly within the United States, we are in a time of wounding where we're out of control. Mm-hmm. We don't know what's going to happen next. We think we put some measures in control and it just gets worse. They're predicting in the United States by December there will be 300,000 deaths from this pandemic. And so when we're out of control, we reach for disconnecting behaviors. That's how the brain works. We know that from neuroscience, that when we are overwhelmed, and we are overwhelmed right now, the brain disconnects. And not very many of us are mature enough, wise enough to gently say to ourselves, come on back, be present, be here now in the midst of this with kindness, welcome. And so it's my theory that all of the fighting about everything and the division, it is a result of staying in that place of trauma, of disconnection, which quite honestly leads to more trauma, more disconnection, and exhaustion.
And that state of disconnection, I think, you know, as therapists, we tend to see it on an individual level. But it seems like for the first time, at least as far as I can remember, this is the first time we're seeing it on a global level. And we were talking last night, and I've noticed just with clients in the U.S. and Europe and now in Australia that that there is such a disconnect, and there's such loneliness, and with that a lot of anxiety and depression.
Yes, and addiction, because we want something to make us feel better, and it feels counterintuitive when we're overwhelmed, panicked, anxious, confused, to reach out to someone, to connect. So we go to those addictive behaviors, or we might join a cause or a protest, as we see happening here in the States, to find some sense, once again, of control. But control does not connect people.
It definitely does, and that ties in with a couple of things. That Joanne, you had a question about addiction.
Yes, this is actually very interesting, and I work myself with a lot of people that are going through addictions or actually in recovery. Some still with the addiction very, very heavy, and some in recovery. And so this time of the pandemic, it has been like amazing, a huge trigger for them on all the different levels. For those with substance abuse, narcotics, even addiction to food or sexual addiction, video game addictions. And so my question was more related to how, based on your experience, how would you see the difference of someone coming from an addictive world and trying to belong into a world, let's say a non-addictive, you know, like with a group of people that perhaps are not in that environment, which I think is one of the biggest challenge of most of the people going through recovery. They have to start with a new lifestyle, right? And they have to start with like perhaps maybe new friends, new social groups or support groups. What can you say when they feel that they don't really belong in that group? You know, for like 20 years, I've been an alcoholic, and now you're putting me in this group that it's healthy people, and perhaps they drink, but in a social way, not in a. So how can someone feel that belonging? You know, and
I think that's a good question, and I am speaking from experience here because. Okay. I'm myself a recovering alcoholic addict. And I know when I first started going to those meetings and became a member of a club I did not want to be a part of, I feel exactly what you're talking about. I think it is an experience in addiction, but we experience it in lots of other groups too, where we have to have the courage to, as Brene Brown says, brave the wilderness. So I know for the first year of my sobriety, I didn't do anything socially because I just was afraid I wouldn't know how to be.
How to react, exactly.
Yet I didn't feel at home in, you know, I felt like I didn't speak the right language at the 12-step meetings. And so I was pretty quiet. It was a lonely time. There is something about that wilderness that can help us connect to our true selves if we let it, if we use that time to reflect on, you know, loneliness was why I started drinking to begin with. Anxiety of being me was why I started to drink to begin with. So I'm going to feel all these feelings, and it's going to feel kind of lonely. But if people will hang in there, strangely, in these weird recovery meetings, you do find a sense of belonging. And then when you're in those social settings that maybe you stayed away from a while, you can also feel like you belong there because you belong to yourself. Part of the message of the book that I wrote about belonging is we have to start by belonging to ourselves and knowing who I really am, what I value, what I want. And I knew I did not want the lifestyle of an alcoholic anymore. It was shame, fear, dread, hurting my children, my friends, and harming myself, and feeling like crap most of the time. And so it was worth it to brave that wilderness, to start to feel like I liked myself. I wasn't harming my children. I did what I said I was going to do. I could show up for other people. But that long thinking, Joanne, like you said, is hard at the beginning of recovery because you're thinking about how much you hurt and how judged you feel and how unfair it is that you have to be an alcoholic. And all I can say to people is hang in there. Maybe one of the gifts of this pandemic, even though it has triggered substance abuse in the United States by 70%, but maybe one of the gifts is we can learn the benefits of taking time. Most things take time.
Yeah, well, I was talking to a client, and I was saying how to look at the things in a different way. Where before, a lot of the people had what we call the FOMO, fear of missing out, and how to start getting into the JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. You know, and it's actually very true. He was explaining to me how now the pressure has been waived because he's like, now I'm not missing. I'm enjoying the fact that I am whatever everybody else is doing. It's okay because nothing is happening, or like, you know. So that in a way can relieve a little bit of the pressure that sometimes leads people into an addiction in order to numb their emotions, you know. That pressure.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a very good point.
Well, I have a question building on that. You mentioned getting to know ourselves and what it is we really want. And I feel like you know, we live so much on social media nowadays, which is a very addictive behavior in many
By
ways.
itself.
But I feel like I get snippets from people's lives. I see what they want me to see, which I think is more of an image. But this almost seems like a different language of getting to know what we want as opposed to what we want people to think we want.
Yes, I found, especially with a lot of my younger clients, I have children in their 30s, and my daughter is very politically active, very progressive, involved in a lot of social justice causes. And yet, because of social media, we've talked about, are you really interested in that? Or do you just want it to look like you're interested in that? Because one is a disconnecting experience when I'm doing it for those posts and those likes and to be seen on social media, which is not a real world. And rather than to be engaged because this is something I'm truly passionate about. So getting to know ourselves is a foreign concept to most of us in this world, because most of us have chapters in our stories or pages in our stories that we just as soon tear out. But when you tear out a page of your story or someone else's story, it really, you might as well throw the whole book away. Because every page is part of your formation. And helps you know, like I often say, without knowing your story, without knowing my story, some people might think, well, she's just a controlling, uptight woman. But if you knew my story of having to move a lot and meet new people and growing up in a family and a religion that was pretty performance-based, then you might understand why some of those controlling tendencies. If you just saw my behavior, you might think, well, she's a selfish person because she drank so much and got a DUI. But if you know my story, all the pages in my story, then you come to understand how a person gets that way, and that's usually not the end of the story for most people. But it takes courage, and you have to be willing to face some ruins and allow your heart to be open to where the story is taking you.
And so now this is really, okay, this really goes against a lot of pop psychology out here, where it's, and I rail against some of this on my own, just the 7 simple steps to overcoming, letting go of things. This really draws you back. I mean, you mentioned that instead of tearing the pages out, that they're actually part of the story. What does that do? I mean, this sounds very authentic. I mean, we're talking about authenticity here. And so what does that offer people to go back? Because I know a lot of the common arguments would be, well, why would I want to live in the past? Why would I want to go backwards? I just need to move forward. So what would you say to people who would hold that kind of a view?
Well, if you do not process your story, it will process you. So if you do not look at how your father harmed you, you will not see how you are harming your own children. If you do not look at how you were marginalized or judged, you will be blind to how you are marginalizing and judging other people. So it really is this circle of belonging, that what I can offer myself, I can offer others, and what I cannot offer myself. So if I'm going to tear some pages out of my story, I'm going to tear some pages out of your story.
Ooh.
And then we have 2 incomplete people who cannot connect, because we can only connect fully when we're wholehearted. And so in my book, I tell the story about getting a DUI, which happened about 15 years ago, and I have not talked about it until the last few years because I haven't been ready to. And yet now in telling that story, it makes me more compassionate for other people who have done selfish things that they never thought they would do, because addiction deforms us and distorts us. But yet know that DUI and sitting in the back of a police car with handcuffs made me want freedom in a way that I would have never wanted it. So it was a necessary part of my story.
And that seems like it also gives you a lot of, it gives you a lot of room to not only to take ownership, but to actually to own your story to the point that nobody can hold it over you, in a sense of freedom.
When I own my story, it doesn't own me. And then I can make it available. And what I have discovered, and I mean, I just met most of you. I know Jason, but I can see your faces even on Zoom. I can see moments of connection. What I've discovered is no matter what our political beliefs or religious beliefs or perspectives, if we start talking about these things, like I've been lonely, I've been selfish, I've done things I'm ashamed of, you're likely to say, me too. And then we're at the place of connection. That's why I am so passionate about knowing your story, so that then you can invite others to share their stories.
Meaning as well. First off, I'm very honored and humbled to be hearing this from you, Miss Sharon. There is something that, well, I think I'm the youngest person here, so I probably know what's going on, at least from my generation's point of view. Um, it's quite unfortunate that 95% to 98% of my generation have lost the voice in their head and replaced it with other voices, right?
Wow.
Uh, there's a fundamental voice in your head that speaks to you and tells you that is your intuition, that is your passion, what you want in life. That disappeared with the, like you said, the emergence of social media, with the emergence of Instagram, with the emergence of Twitter, Facebook, all these things. Unfortunately, they replace the voice in our heads that tells us where to go. And we start acting on impulses and acting upon things that we don't like just because we're seeing somebody else's highlight reel. Albeit, this is a different discussion altogether. What I really found interesting is your concept of belonging and the concept of meaning. So I truly believe that, I won't say 100%. I'm no expert. I'm no psychologist. I am not even a researcher. I don't have a degree in psychology. But if there's one thing that I learned, is that when you find meaning in life, a lot of things start to hurt less. When I say things, I mean a lot of the emotional pain that we suffered in the past starts to like stab us less, starts to shock us less, starts to make us feel less electrified on the inside, and it starts becoming fuel to our purposeful life because we found a goal to live by, right? So yeah, that's probably something I wanted to say just from hearing you speak.
I mean, Hussein, I've never heard it said that way. And I
Yeah.
think that's brilliant that it's not just your generation, that most of us have so many voices in our head, you know, here in the States, whether it's Fox News or NPR or that we don't even recognize our own voice.
Yeah.
So no wonder we're disconnected. I mean, I'm going to remember that. That is really powerful.
There's a phrase that says that we are the most, like my generation is the most disconnected generation from life.
That's true.
Disconnected, not connect, because we have everybody's life available to us 24/7, that we lost connection with us as human, with each other as human beings. But going back to belonging and meaning, and that resonates from a lack of meaning.
Mhm.
That because we have no purpose or meaning, we start reaching out to these easy fixes and these painkillers because we don't want to face the real monster. We don't want to face the dragon. We want to face these things, this candy, these like little stimuluses for our brains to keep us occupied. And that draws me to my question. Because of these dangerous platforms, and with the rise of campaigning, right? Campaigning is a great thing, especially if you equip it with the right resources and the right people. But unfortunately, it is so easy for me to advertise myself, right?
Mhm.
These days, there is I call it fault. There are a lot of vulnerable people these days, and a lot of people are suffering, and are looking for a light, right? And they see somebody who is telling them what they want to hear. Okay, and they're coining terms of empowerment just to make these people feel better for a short period of time. Granted, these people could have good intentions, right? I'm not saying these are bad people per se, but the action itself is not fixing the problem, because vulnerable people, for them to overcome, I mean, for them to evolve and reach their next evolution, they need to be put under, I won't say the microscope, but they need to invest a lot of work, and quick fixes don't get us there. So with the rise of all these empowerment movements I see today, granted, albeit in good intention, what is the right way to empower people and not utilize these people's vulnerability to fulfill our own egotistic side of our minds, and not feed upon their vulnerability just because we want to make ourselves feel better? I hope it makes sense.
Oh, it does, and it's so important. I just learned recently that in the psychological community, there is a new phrase. Instead of codependence, it's called prodependence. And it is encouraging people to be dependent on you. Whether it's me encouraging my adult children that you can't figure this out, I've got to do it for you, or it's some charismatic leader saying, I've got the answers, step in line with me. Once again, like you said, it's not listening to that inner voice of wisdom, not learning to even recognize it, of intuition, of what do I value and why do I value it? And how has my story informed that? And what do I want my story to look like going forward? And so I think we empower people, and this is going to sound simple, but it's not simplistic, because if it was easy, we would all do it. I think we empower people by giving them the welcome and the room and the resources to find their own faith, their own hope, and live out what love looks like. So I think people are empowered by faith, hope, and love. And that means they're not empowered by programs, by social media influencers, by celebrities, because like you said, that's all about ego. And so for me, I'm thinking mostly of my adult children who are so different from me, that it's been giving them room. Yeah, find your own faith. Figure out what you hope for and go for it. But don't lose sight of love yourself, love others. Because that is what is not going, that's what's going to energize you. What this, especially your generation, Hussein, I'm not picking on you, but the younger generation does not know is all that disconnection that comes by picking up the phone and scrolling through it every 30 minutes and looking for someone to follow and figuring out what their hairstyle is and what their political affiliation is. That is exhausting.
Of course.
Being present to yourself and maybe just the 5 other people in the room.
Yeah.
This is not exhausting to me.
Yeah, and there is also the conditioning aspect. Like when you, for example, when we take people in, it's not about, there is this mindset of owing. I don't like this word. What I owe you, you owe me. That is something that has been circulating very much in my generation, and I feel like people older, I don't know about people younger, but I hear this a lot when somebody tells me, when I do good for someone and they reply to me, I don't owe you anything. What is that supposed to mean? I keep asking myself, what is that supposed to mean? And how do we inherit it? How do we inherit this mindset? I think, in my opinion, like I said, I'm no expert, but I feel like it's not about woe me and this materializing help. It's me acting as me. It's me being myself, right? That's who I am. This is the manifestation of what's inside of me. Like when I see something that wants help, I help it.
Yes.
It doesn't want to help me back. That's fantastic. If not, that's also fantastic, because I'm not a leech, right? That's for me, speaking for myself. But I see a lot of people leeching on emotions from other people, like helping others out, just so that they can get a certain amount of, you know, that oxytocin-inducing feeling. It's sad to see this happening because there is an origin story to this as well. Like when somebody's helping people just to pounce on that oxytocin. But at the same time, it's not the right way, right? It's not the right methodology to go by to start extracting love from others or extracting feelings. I think the way to go about it, I mean, would love to hear your opinion on this as well, is to internalize. And when you internalize and you feel the presence of, me and Jason were talking about this earlier. When you feel that, people have many faiths, people believe in a lot of things, but when you feel that esoteric presence that connects you to something higher than you,
Mhm.
right? You can call it whatever you like, but once you replace that with things from the outside world, you start damaging yourself.
Yeah,
I hope it makes sense. I don't know.
it does. I mean, I like to call that presence love, and I think it what you just described, the leeching off of people, is the opposite of vulnerability. Vulnerability is showing up and, like you said, being seen in the essence of who you are, whether people love you back or not, whether people are loyal to you or not, whether people are with you one day and they're gone the next day. And that is hard to do when your primary concern is what other people think about you. But most of us operate out of that reptilian part of the brain, which is, what do you think of me and what do I want to do right now? Instead of, what do I think of me? And where does that come from? And what should it look like as I go out into the world?
100%.
And I have a question, and I think this is kind of for everybody, because in Kuwait we have, and really more in the region, we have more of a collective culture, and so the sense of self and family, these are very, very tied, and so it's hard, I think, to talk about things like if someone struggles with addiction or if someone is struggling with areas that may not be socially favorable. It's very hard to communicate those kind of areas. And so what would your advice be to someone who's listening, who may be struggling to find help or to be heard? I get emails every so often saying, I don't want to have to go to a counselor. I don't want to have to go to seek help, but I don't know who else to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So what would your advice to those listeners be?
Well, I think I would love to hear from you guys a little bit more about this collective sense, as you said, Jason, that makes you feel like you're betraying your family or you're letting people down if you talk honestly about your life. I mean, that's certainly true in certain parts of the United States too, certainly in the church culture, in some demographics. Certainly part of what I grew up with most of my life was, I need to not be an embarrassment to my family or to my faith, which also kept me disconnected. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, because I don't know a ton about what you're talking about there.
Okay. Well, Dina or Hussein or
belonging?
Joanne, go ahead.
Sorry, my voice is late. So we do have the sense of belonging to a group is really high for us. But what we see is that we have been distributed into groups rather than coming together as one. Because this sense of belonging to a certain group or a certain type of mentality, as surprising that we are a very small country with a small popularity, but we have been divided into groups. And this had shifted us apart instead of bringing us together. So you're not just afraid of what your family might think about you. Your family would also be ashamed if there is something the other groups would know about you.
Ah.
Yes.
So I mean,
when we talk about the collectivistic society, is the individual's behavior impact the surrounding. Okay, so here in the Middle East, not just in Kuwait, all over the Middle East, we've seen how, and that's why mental health has a huge stigma attached to it, because there is the belief that if one member of the family is, let's say, suffering from something, then the other members of the family will have to pay the consequences of that as well. You know, like in Kuwait, is like, if my sister has mental issues, then I'm not gonna be able to get married. If my you know, so it's a big impact. You can see the impact on an individual. There's a big impact on the rest of the circle of that person. So you can imagine the weight, you know, the pressure.
I mean, there's something that sounds honorable about that, in that it is true that what we do has a ripple effect. But the ripple effect that I'm hearing, or sometimes what I call the echo effect, is it can be an echo of shame. So it's, you struggle with mental illness. Oh, that means I'm bad. That means I'm bad. That means I'm bad. Instead,
that family's bad. Yeah.
Yes. Instead of the echo of blessing and gratitude, you struggle with mental illness. I want to be here for you. I struggle with something else, and I need someone to be there for me. And that takes a heart. I mean, what dispels gratitude, what dispels shame is gratitude. And by that I mean, and I don't know what you guys would think of this, even gratitude for our pain and our struggles. Because when I become grateful for my struggle with addiction, which took me a long time, by the way, to become grateful for it. When I become grateful for it, I'm no longer ashamed. I know that I have learned lessons that have cost a great deal. And I'm going to offer something very costly to someone else. And I hope they receive it with gratitude and turn around and give it to someone else with gratitude. And so I certainly could not speak to what would change that in your culture. And yet I want to say we're not that different here. We have maybe different reasons because we're much more fragmented here. But I think shame still is often the glue that holds most of us together. And it's a toxic glue. And what we don't realize is that gratitude dissolves it. When I'm grateful, not just for my struggles, but if I happen to have gifts, if someone in my family can, is a tremendous athlete, or can play a musical instrument, or can make $150,000 in a year, that's a gift to be grateful for. So there's no pride or shame, just gratitude. That's a connector.
I feel the sense of Sharon that you're applying the positive psychology in the way you're approaching. Is that true?
Can you say what you mean by positive psychology?
I'm a strong fan. I'm a big fan of positive psychology. Is that the focusing on the positive emotions and researching on positive emotions instead of the negative ones?
Well, I believe the negative ones are also signs to what's going on in our life. But when it comes to changing things, no one was ever changed by being judged, condemned, or having something crammed down their throat. So if by positive psychology you mean letting go of someone's throat, letting them feel what they're feeling, and welcoming them, I think that is then where those things like truth, beauty, goodness grow. And this idea that somehow I deserve to be offended by someone, that means I'm the judge and they've done something to me, back to what you said, saying they owe me something. I just think how arrogant that is, that I would be the judge of anyone. And yet we act like that sometimes, especially when we get on social media. And I have to remind myself, am I adding any value to this world by what I'm posting? Because if I'm not, then I'm part of the problem.
Okay. See, so my question was, I just have to elaborate more. So most of the research in psychology has focused on the negative side of emotions. So for example, clinical psychology has explored the causes and symptoms of sadness rather than happiness. And only a few psychological studies have explored the consequences of being happy. And I love these studies of Martin Seligman, and he had this movement, yes, of the movement of happiness. So, and he shifted his studies from negative emotions such as suicide, depression, and schizophrenia, and he shifted it and developed the happiness movement in psychology, which you a bit remind me of him. So he described that happiness could be broken down into three aspects, like the positive emotion, the positive character, and the positive institution, and which he meant the meaningful life.
Yes, I've read his work, and I love many things that he says. I think maybe to tie it together with what I also believe and go back to the category of meaning that Hussein was talking about, that it's not so much what happens to us in life that is that important. Of course, we make it important, and therapists, unfortunately, sometimes spend all their time talking about what happened to you. But it's the meaning that we give to it. So how do we take something negative, like sexual abuse, or a broken family, or being marginalized or rejected by a part of the culture? How do we take something that is truly negative and apply that positive perspective? And I think it does require this turning upside down of our thinking. I am a believer that we are most blessed when we come to the end of our rope. That we are most blessed when sometimes nobody understands us. That once again, it's in these wilderness times that we can then find that the negative things that happen to us do not have to mean that we are doomed, that we will never experience joy, that we cannot have peace, that we have nothing to offer to the world. That in fact, those negative things that maybe were meant to harm us and bring us despair can actually be turned for good. I don't know about you, but I don't want to talk to someone who's never had any struggles or problems.
Yeah.
I want to talk to someone who emanates joy, but they have suffered.
Yeah. There is a saying that life is suffering.
Yes.
And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. I don't look at it as negative. I think it's very, I think we can look at it in a very, very meaningful way. Actually, if we take out all the bad things in life and just put the good out there, the good will have no meaning anymore.
Well, think about the movies and the books and stories that we like to read. They're not all just tales. They come
all suffering.
Right. But it's suffering. It's a bad story if it's suffering that ends with disconnection.
Yeah.
good
Like if the person was so consumed by their trauma that they couldn't move forward in life and they were stuck in the victimization loop. That's not a story that anybody wants to see.
right. It's a
They're
good
not here
story.
to sympathize over somebody.
It's a good story if there's suffering that ends with connection. And
Transmutation. Yeah.
yes, and then I think that that transmutation allows us to bring that positivity that you're talking about to other people. I mean, that's certainly what I want to do in my practice as a therapy, in my relationship with my adult children, that as some say, life is suffering, but that's not all it is.
Of course. I mean,
Right.
I think the saying is trying to like when they say life is suffering, life is beauty, but beauty cannot come without suffering. I look at it this way. Life is beautiful, but you can't grasp and appreciate that beauty without suffering first.
Yes. So one of my favorite authors, his name is G.K. Chesterton, and he said, we tell children fairy tales, not so they will be afraid of dragons, because children already know there are dragons. We tell children fairy tales so they will know the dragons can be defeated.
Of course. Of course.
I like that.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that researchers are still trying to find out the studies of happiness and what causes happiness. And we have this chicken and egg situation. Is it the good social relations that causes you happiness, or whether the happiness caused good relations, or whether the good relations caused happiness? Yeah.
Yes, I don't know the answer to that. I think it's yes.
Right.
Well, and I think when you go to one side or the other in that equation, when you're looking at, let's say, the environment over the individual, or vice versa, you put the burden so much on one side. I mean, when you read Walden 2 by Skinner, it really is a terrifying story. I mean, this is B.F. Skinner's Utopia was a completely controlled environment. And as I read it, I mean, and I was trying to remind myself, this was Skinner's idea of a good time, okay? And so there you have these small towns, no more than 200 people. Everything is geared in one direction so that everybody has this maximized potential for enjoyment. And what you realize is that in that equation, you either have to have a perfectly controlled environment with someone controlling it. And the question then is, who controls the environment?
Mm-hmm.
Or on the other side, you're completely responsible for making the environment beneficial and positive. And so I think there's that balance where when you get into almost like a Hegelian dialectic, where you have one interaction feeding off of the other, this reciprocity, that it becomes very complicated. And so to the point even where you have some people whose sense of positivity will be so driven in one direction that it interferes with the positive nature of the others. And so you have this collision where, you know, I might be the hero in one story and the antagonist in the next.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sorry.
Very true, I said.
And so I think it's that balance of because I mean, you think about recently Superman and the heroes that came out. If Superman didn't have a nemesis, you wouldn't go see it. I mean, to the point that Superman had no weaknesses, and they tried to kill him. Every movie they tried to kill him. He has no weaknesses. So then it becomes, you know, the question isn't, wow, you know, Superman can defeat anybody. The question automatically turns to what are his weaknesses? Because I think in some senses,
Kryptonite. So
there is kryptonite. There is kryptonite.
He does have weaknesses. I mean, of course we all do, and that's I think why we're intended to be in community, so that what I don't know, you can fill in, and what you haven't experienced, I can share. But that takes a humility that is for some reason missing from this world. And maybe it is that we're just scared. And so we act like we don't have kryptonite. We don't have any weaknesses. We don't need anybody. But it's not working out well for us, and certainly not leading to that joy that you're talking about. And so, I mean, certainly the message of my book, Belonging, is that if we were to look around us, I want to believe every moment and every person that I interact with has the potential to bring meaning, not just to me, but to this world. And that takes us away from the social media, celebrity, influencer category. It just means we just show up, we're seen, and we love without an agenda.
I think that's very beautiful, Miss Sharon. I think also we can also add one little piece of information is that we're all in the same boat together. No one's better than the other, and we all have the same struggles. Because of this fake digital world that is being presented to us, we always think that this person has no similar struggles to what I'm experiencing today. And that is completely false. That is something that I learned, that if you think you're insecure, if you think you are anxious or depressed or have all these negative psychological aspects in your being, then you have to be sure that the other, like a lot of the population has similar symptoms to you. Right? Because you're being so disconnected and isolated, you're seeing the highlight reels, you feel so plunged into this cycle of I'm unworthy, and you're constantly being affirmed because you're so attached to that platform.
Yes.
You're so attached to it. So it's affirming, it's confirming to your brain that you're unhappy, or you deserve to be unhappy, you deserve to be miserable, and you deserve to be depressed. You don't deserve to get out of the loop, right?
Well, look, we are doing it right now. We don't know each other. We're on opposite sides of the world. I don't know what you believe about a lot of things. You don't know what I believe about a lot of things. And yet I felt connection because we're talking about the matters that are true, as you said, Hussein, for everyone.
Yeah, like no one's perfect. No one's got it all together. No one's happy all the time. But for sure, if there's one thing I know for sure, if you have meaning, then at least you think your life is worth living, and you'll see it out through the end. That is something very precious. That I think this is the most precious thing in the world that nobody highlights. Meaning.
I agree. And I mean, in my book, one of my favorite quotations, I don't know who said it, but one of my favorite quotations is that you want someone to know the truth, tell them. But if you want someone to believe the truth, tell them a story. And I believe that as we tell our stories, we begin to believe there is meaning, there is connection. We can love one another, that everything we need is right here. We just need to be here.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It is. And so having that authentic presence, that realness, that where there's transparency and authenticity on display, not in a way that we're threatened or in a way that we're judgmental, but in a peaceful way, in the sense that I'm going to lay myself out and let you know both sides of me, and you can choose to accept or reject, but this is who I am. That's a scary way to live, but I think it's a beautiful way at the same time, because I think in all of us there's that fear of rejection or that fear of being misunderstood. But if I'm honest with myself, I at least know that if someone walks away, I've been as honest with who I am as possible.
And Jason, self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the authentic life, because it contradicts that voice that Hussein was talking about, that voice inside of us that says, no, you're beloved. So we get so worried about everyone else rejecting us, but it's self-rejection that is the greatest enemy, because it keeps us from believing what I said just a few minutes ago. Everything we need is right here, if we will just have open hands.
That's right. It's beautiful. Oh, I wish we had 5 more hours. I think we could we could keep going.
That connection is not exhausting.
I know, right?
It's invigorating. Because I could keep talking forever too, but I've got clients at the office. Bad.
Definitely. Well, Sharon, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us the importance of belonging, but also giving us time and actually showing us what belonging looks like. I just think this has been such a wonderful time, and I'm really thankful for that.
Oh, it's been such an honor for me. I hope we do this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to.
This is one of the best interview things I've done. And
Wow.
That's amazing.
I feel like we still have many more chapters to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, we meet every other week. And so
No pressure. No pressure.
anytime.
Pick your day.
Anytime next Thursday or Friday. But but no, it really has been a wonderful thing. Now, for people who are interested in your book, what is the best way? Because we have a few bookstores in Kuwait, but not tons. Most is online. What's the best way to get a copy of Belonging?
We have a few bookstores here, but most is online too. So,
Okay.
I mean, do you do Amazon?
Yeah.
Amazon,
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's
Okay.
where I buy everything. So the book is definitely on Amazon, and it is called Belonging, Finding the Way Back to One Another. And my name is Sharon Hersh, Hersh. So yeah, pick it up. And I hope it will provoke good conversation. I don't expect everyone to agree with everything that's in the book, but there will certainly be conversation starters.
Sure, absolutely. Well, now one other question: is it available on audio?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
All right.
that's amazing.
I think it just showed up on audio.
Okay.
I mean, that was a unique experience having to read my book out loud. It will be my old raggedy voice reading the book, and it is available on audio from Amazon.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, we definitely look forward to more conversations and more time. Anytime you're free, you let us know, and we're available. So we definitely enjoyed it. And again, you can find Sharon's book online, iTunes. I would imagine it's being picked up through the iTunes store.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Amazon as well. So again, thank you so much, Sharon, and we look forward to the next time. All right.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
It was an honor.
Thank you, Ms. Sharon. All right.
It was a pleasure meeting you, Sharon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You guys